Hey, what's up everybody? It is Uncle Matt here. WrestleMania week continues, and today we are going through and we're ranking every single WrestleMania from worst all the way up into best. What's the worst WrestleMania of all time? What's the greatest WrestleMania of all time? This is the definitive list right here. Got my old school Hulkamania shirt on to commemorate going all the way back to the start of it all, WrestleMania 1. Where is that one going to be on the list? We're going to get right into it. Quick disclaimer before we get in, little asterisk. I said we're ranking all the WrestleManias. When I was going through and trying to decide how I wanted to do this, what WrestleMania I wanted to put first, what WrestleMania I wanted to put last, it didn't seem fair to rank the COVID year WrestleMania, the Performance Center year WrestleMania, alongside all the others. Because even though, you know, on short notice with everything in the world falling apart, WWE was one of the first things that really put out a show, put out some form of entertainment, tried to keep things going as best they possibly could. It's just really not fair to compare a bunch of matches that went down in an empty arena, or an empty warehouse really, because it was the Performance Center. It wasn't even an arena at that point in time. It wasn't even the Thunderdome, which was a great evolution by WWE. To compare that empty, void, silent, just nothing happening WrestleMania with no crowds, no noise, just to compare that to like 70,000 seat packed stadiums of crowds going nuts and just some of the best matches of all time just didn't seem fair, so I excluded that one from the list. That one's off the list, which I've always thought was just a great injustice to Drew McIntyre, because that was supposed to be his big culminating winning the world title at WrestleMania moment at that show, and just ended up beating Brock Lesnar in a quiet warehouse with nobody to see it. But that one is the only one I left out the list. All the other 37 WrestleManias that have taken place so far are on the list. So without further ado, let's get right into it. What WrestleMania are we starting off with? What's at the bottom of the list? What is number 37? Alright, starting off our countdown, the worst WrestleMania of all time, number 37. 37, because there's been 38 so far. We took one off the list. Number 37, my ranking for the worst WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 2. Now, at the time, some of these matches might have been great. They might have been things that entertained the fans of that generation, but it's probably the one that, if you look at it, that's just got the least memorable history to it. It's not one that gets talked about a whole lot. The main event was Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy, which was more in line with kind of the traditional Hulk Hogan setup of Hulk Hogan fights big monster guy, beats them, and is still the strong Hulk Hogan that everybody loves. Didn't really fit his trajectory of WrestleMania, where he was actually fighting bigger superstars. Like, you know, he goes on to fight, you know, well, we'll get into it later, but his WrestleMania matches, as things would go on, would be more aligned with superstars of his level, as opposed to him just fighting the monster of the month that was kind of his tradition in the 80s. So that match being the main event, that being the only, and I don't even know if many people remember that, it was a cage match. Probably the most memorable thing about WrestleMania 2 is that it's the only WrestleMania that was designated to take place in different locations. It was Chicago, Nassau Coliseum, just outside of New York, and Los Angeles. 3 different arenas hosted parts of WrestleMania. There's 4 matches, I believe, at each venue. Interestingly enough, I was looking through stuff, doing my research for this, and there was only a total attendance across the 3 venues of about 40,000 people. So if you think about that compared to what's going to happen at the next WrestleMania, the famous WrestleMania 3, which will be probably popping up, well, it will be popping up on the list eventually, but to only get 40,000 for WrestleMania 2 after the huge success of WrestleMania 1, got to be one of the down moments in WrestleMania history. They definitely that experiment didn't work. They never went back to that multi-location experiment, really. So there you have it. The worst WrestleMania of all time is officially WrestleMania 2. Alright, so we started our countdown with the worst WrestleMania, and it was the second ever WrestleMania. So kind of a little bit of synergy here. Our next one on the list, moving up a step, is the second to most recent WrestleMania, WrestleMania 37. The first WrestleMania kind of out of the pandemic era. I kind of debated should I rank this one or not, because it was the first one out of the Thunderdome, the first one with fans back. It was still kind of restricted seating, not, you know, full capacity, but I felt I should rank it because I feel like WWE so badly botched the first show back. This is your first big show back, and they literally had like all heels winning the biggest matches. We had Bobby Lashley beating Drew McIntyre, like Drew McIntyre's chance for redemption after getting his big WrestleMania moment the year before in an empty warehouse, comes back and loses to Bobby Lashley. The main event, obviously this has led to bigger and better things, so it was fine at the time, and it's part of a story that's going on to all the way up into the WrestleMania we have coming up this weekend. But Roman Reigns just dominating Edge and Daniel Bryan in a triple threat match and stacking them both up and just burying both of them. Daniel Bryan's last match in WWE up to this point. Obviously things have changed. He's in a new place now, but just a kind of sour taste in your mouth. They really should have, you know, you can't just have the baby faces win every match. You can't just always give the fans what you want. You have to do stuff that's best for story. But like that WrestleMania, the first WrestleMania back in front of fans after everything everybody had gone through over the last year plus, to kind of like have the two biggest matches on the show both have like heel victories was just like so weird. No real memorable moments, no real signature moments for that WrestleMania, and that's why it's pretty low, right at the bottom of the list at number 36. Number 35 on our list of all-time WrestleManias, WrestleMania 7. This WrestleMania, you know, probably best known for the fact that they had to change venues late in the game. Originally, they were trying to do this WrestleMania at the Los Angeles Coliseum, trying to do a big stadium, trying to replicate some of the early success they'd had, being at the Sky Dome in Toronto, being at the Silver Dome in Detroit. Did I screw that up like Hulk Hogan did? I don't think so. But they, you know, they've said they moved it for security risks, but that's pretty much a kayfabe reason. The real reason is they just weren't selling enough tickets to fill up the stadium they were going to do. So they moved it to a Los Angeles arena instead. The main event was Hogan versus Sergeant Slaughter, while Sergeant Slaughter was playing a character of a Iraqi sympathizer in the middle of the Gulf War. Nothing really there. I mean, that was what it was. Hogan goes over, big American hero, gets the belt back. You also, probably the most significant moment in WWE history that happened on this show was the reunion of Savage and Miss Elizabeth getting back together after being separated on TV for a while. I think they were just completely separated in real life. I don't think they ever really got back together in real life, but I could be wrong about that. But big emotional moment. Everybody was crying in the stands. That's probably the most memorable moment from this WrestleMania, but kind of a dud for the most part. Number 34 on the countdown is going to be WrestleMania 11. I don't know why I overstretched those syllables. This is kind of like the ultimate kind of peak of WWE's transition period, where the Hogan era was completely over. Vince hadn't fully committed to Brett. He kind of fell out of favor with him. He was looking to go back to a big guy. Diesel gets shoved into the main event picture. At the time, you know, you can go back and look at the records. You know, he disputes this, but it's, by all accounts, one of the most financially unsuccessful title reigns in history was Diesel's, to the point that he doesn't even get to main event this WrestleMania. In his only WrestleMania as world champion, HBK, he beats him. Shawn Michaels, the boyhood dream, maybe has to wait till another year. We'll find out as we go along. But this WrestleMania was main evented by Lawrence Taylor against Bam Bam Bigelow. And it's pretty cool for Bam Bam Bigelow because he's one of the most respected wrestlers, you know, in the game, one of the best big men, you know, cross multiple eras, wrestled all over the world. So for him to get a WrestleMania main event, that's pretty cool. But for it to be against a football player, which, you know, in all due respect, it was a good match for a non-wrestler versus a wrestler. But I mean, doesn't really fit the bill of what WrestleMania has been and would become. So pretty low on the list, WrestleMania 11. All right, number 33 on the list, and I swear I didn't do this on purpose. It just weirdly worked out this way when I was going through and doing my rankings. Number 33 on the list is WrestleMania 33. Nice little synergy there. This is probably the worst of the most recent WrestleManias. I mean, obviously it's the lowest on the list outside of WrestleMania 37, but I mean, there's really one signature moment from the show, and it was the big return of the Hardy Boys. They got the big pop when they returned, which pretty much lasted for just that night, and then WWE kind of just wasted their potential, because one hallmark of the late Vince McMahon era was he would always bury and not do right by the legends or the veterans. It was all, you know, just use them to make them look stupid, make jokes out of them, but whatever. We had Reigns versus Undertaker in this. This is another attempt to like give Reigns a big win at WrestleMania. This is kind of that whole period where every WrestleMania was trying to figure out what was going to be Roman Reigns' big win to like prove that he's a new guy, that he's the great dude that we're all supposed to be celebrating. You know, never quite always worked. We got a big Goldberg-Lesnar rematch after the shocking Survivor Series match they had, so not a whole lot to this WrestleMania. That you can see why it's pretty low on the list. You know, if the big moment is the Hardy Boys returning, which was cool in the moment, but ultimately, you know, a very forgettable WrestleMania. All right, this next one is probably going to be the one where I kind of differ from a lot of major lists. I see this one often listed as the worst WrestleMania, but for me, I've got it a little higher than most people. I've got it at number 32, and that's WrestleMania 9. Now, a lot of people didn't like this because it felt like it was a retread. It felt like when WWE was trying to go in a new direction, they were backtracking with Hogan once again winning the world title, in this case unexpectedly, but this is the first WrestleMania I watched in its entirety, because I remember renting it at Blockbuster right around the time I was starting to get into WWE. During the Attitude Era, I went to Blockbuster and I was like, oh, let me go watch some of the old WWE stuff, see what they've got. WWF at the time, obviously. And WrestleMania 9 was one of the first ones I rented and watched all the way through, and I thought it was so cool, just the visual layout of how they set up the outdoor setting at Caesars, you know, Vegas. They did some big stadiums, they did some big domes at that point in time, but they hadn't done like a really fully outdoor WrestleMania at that point in time. So the visuals were pretty cool to me. I kind of liked the twist of Hogan, but that was I was seeing it years later when I didn't realize, you know, how burned out people were on the Hogan era of WWE at that time. So it hit me a little bit differently than it probably hit other people. And also I really like Giant Gonzalez's weird like puby bodysuit that he was wearing. I always thought that was just hilarious and really funny to look. But I thought it was a good WrestleMania. You had the funny moment of like Bobby Heenan running backwards on a camel. You know, overall not a great show. Overall, you know, not a whole lot to remember from it, but it was, you know, I thought the visuals were cool, and you know, the Hogan thing worked a little bit better for me than it probably did for other people, but I can't rank it that highly because it's obviously not that great of a WrestleMania. So I've got it at 32. Number 31 on the list, I've got WrestleMania 34. WWE returns to New Orleans for WrestleMania just a few years after the big WrestleMania 30 was there. Not a whole lot to this one. You know, it was a decent show. You know, the match quality was pretty good. The highlights were it was the return of Daniel Bryan after being forced into early retirement due to concussion issues. You had Ronda Rousey's, you know, WWE debut at this show, and you had one of like 500 times that Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar have faced each other in a main event pay-per-view match. So quality-wise, the matches were all good, but in terms of like memorable signature moments of WrestleMania, a little bit lacking in that regard. So that's why it's pretty low on the list for me. Number 30 on the list, I've got WrestleMania 19. This is another one where the match quality on the show, you know, if you look at people's rankings, they have it pretty highly for that, because it has a really awesome Chris Jericho, Shawn Michaels match. It's Stone Cold's last match up until last year. Him and The Rock won last time. You've got the just unbelievable, like crazy Brock Lesnar shooting star press disaster on this one. So there's memorable moments, there's signature moments. It was a financial disaster for WWE to the point that like they stopped going to like the Northwest, they stopped going to like Seattle, they stopped going to like even Canada for a little stretch because they just kind of blamed the people there. Not that they didn't put on the best show possible, they didn't build it quite properly. Like literally like a week before this, one of the main events was Lesnar versus Angle, and literally the week before this they did the match on SmackDown for reasons that still remain unclear. I think it was because Kurt Angle had a broken neck and they were worried he wouldn't wrestle at WrestleMania, so he wrestled a week earlier with a broken neck, then wrestled again with a broken neck, then Brock Lesnar almost breaks his neck at this WrestleMania. Some people rank it a little bit higher because of the match quality. I have it a little bit low because this is like the most dead period I ever had in wrestling. Like I was super into wrestling throughout the Attitude Era. Right around here is where I was just completely out, wasn't following it at all. I did not watch this one live. I've only seen some of the matches back in replays and stuff with over the years. And like to this day, it gets one of the worst matches in WrestleMania history, to most people's opinion, is on this show where it was Booker T versus Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship, and it was like a borderline offensive feud that a lot of people thought Booker T should win. And of course, this was peak Triple H at the peak of his powers, in terms of, you know, people thinking he had a little bug in Vince McMahon's ear in terms of creative control. Beats Booker T in a match that most people thought Booker T should have won. So, I mean, that one's obviously just sour taste, but for me, I have it a little bit lower just because this is kind of the ultimate dead period I had with my wrestling fandom, where I was just completely checked out of wrestling at this point in time. Didn't watch it live, probably didn't watch it till almost 10 years later when, like, I heard about, like, oh, well, the Shawn Michaels Jericho match is awesome, and two of my favorites right there, so went back and watched it there. It is a great match. That feud was a really great feud, but I was completely checked out of wrestling at this point in time, so WrestleMania 19 comes in a little bit low for me. All right, as we move into the top 30, we're into number 29. This one I kind of knock it because I feel like they should have made a bigger deal out of it. They didn't really emphasize the specialness of it as much as I probably thought they should have at the time. I remember thinking this was kind of lackluster WrestleMania for what it should have been. It's WrestleMania 25, the 25th anniversary WrestleMania, the 25th WrestleMania. I feel like there should have been some big stuff there, a lot more to it, but it just kind of was fine of a show. You had the first Taker HBK match, which obviously is a hugely legendary match in the history of wrestling, arguably one of the best matches in WrestleMania history. But beyond that, you had Triple H versus Randy Orton. This was at a point where like the same 3 to 4 guys were just main eventing like not only every WrestleMania, but just about every pay-per-view. So it was getting really stale. It was a lot of the same, so you had essentially like the same 5 or 6 guys that main evented every pay-per-view in some combination in the main event of this WrestleMania. You had Triple H versus Randy Orton, and then you had a triple threat match that was Edge, Big Show, and John Cena. So it was just the same people over and over again. HBK Taker at the time was fresh, and I think that might have even helped like people's opinion of the match, just because you hadn't seen those two guys go at each other since like maybe all the way back to Bad Blood in the 90s. But to see them wrestle each other, to have that great match on that, you know, I hate to put it so low because that's just such a legendary match in the history of WrestleMania. But beyond that match, this was a waste of the 25th ever WrestleMania. So sorry, but it's, you know, 29 on my list. Coming in at number 28 on the list, I have got WrestleMania 35, another of the more recent WrestleManias. And I feel like about 34 through 35 is where you can really kind of see the Vince McMahon era kind of really starting to come unglued, because there was so much on this show that should have like set up great stuff for the future that could have really like turned a corner for WWE, but ultimately it didn't. You had Becky winning both the women's championships, setting up the Becky 2 belts era, which I think lasted all of a month. I'm pretty sure she lost one of those belts like a month later. You had Seth Rollins having the chance to be christened as like the new top babyface in his match with Brock Lesnar, and he beats him in like 30 seconds, cheats with a low blow, and a few months later he's doing this horrible feud with Bray Wyatt that he's had to turn himself into this horrible half heel, half jokester, whatever character that he is now to get out of. So disappointing. This one is maybe most remembered for Kurt Angle's last match, where instead of giving him like another legend or one of the better guys on the roster at the time, his retirement match was against frickin' Baron Corbin, who nobody ever wants to see wrestle, period, ever, anytime, everywhere. So to put like an all-time legend like Kurt Angle in his final match ever against Baron Corbin was just like, I mean, yeah, not a whole lot to that one. Honestly, now that I'm kind of talking through it, I almost think like might should have been lower, but these are the rankings. I've already done them. I'm not changing them. This is where we're at. WrestleMania 35 comes in at number 28. All right, at number 27 on our list of all-time WrestleManias, I've got WrestleMania 4. This one's best remembered because this is when Macho Man Randy Savage wins his first ever World Heavyweight Championship, crowning himself at the conclusion of the tournament that was held after the title was held up because of the controversy between Andre the Giant, the twin referees. It's a whole thing. Look it up. It was a good storyline at the time, but ultimately This show is a show-long tournament to recrown a world champion. Unique in that regard, but, you know, ultimately that leads to only really the kind of main event, the main champion being kind of the memorable moment from it. So Savage gets his first title. Great, celebrate that. We were teased that we were going to get the Hogan-Andre rematch from everything we'd want to see, but once again, we never kind of quite got the full, clean rematch again. I think that kind of ended in controversy, and they were both kind of kicked out of the tournament. So, interesting concept doing a world title tournament to take up the entire show for this WrestleMania, but ultimately falls a little low on the WrestleMania scale there. Coming in at number 26, WrestleMania 27. Now this WrestleMania, really and truthfully, there's a trilogy of WrestleManias that are tied together eternally because in one of the few times in modern times there was a clear-cut, really sort of long-term plan for the biggest story in wrestling in WWE, and it was the return of The Rock. WrestleMania 27, The Rock returns to be the host of WrestleMania, but it was all like phase one of a plan to eventually have The Rock and John Cena feud and everything like that. The main event was John Cena versus The Miz, which, I mean, like, somewhere way down the line, somebody's going to look back and say, how did The Miz main event to WrestleMania? Who let this happen? That's neither here nor there. The other kind of significant match from this one was it's the first in the dual series between Triple H and Undertaker. I remember at the time not being very happy that that was happening because it felt to me like Triple H had just seen the two incredible HBK Undertaker matches we'd gotten the previous two WrestleManias, and Triple H kind of came in like, oh, you know, Triple H wasn't in the mix as he had been for like the last like 10 years before that, and I feel like he came in and was like, well, anything Shawn can do, I gotta do it now. You know, I can't let Shawn be the showstopper, the big star of this. I gotta come in and show everybody I can have great matches with The Undertaker. And ultimately he did have a great match with The Undertaker, but I remember in the moment kind of being like kind of a little sour on the idea of Triple H being the next guy in line to try and challenge the streak, because it felt like he was just trying to one-up Shawn in the moment or something like that. So whatever. That's WrestleMania 27. Like I said, it's very tied into the next two WrestleManias that followed it, and we'll get to those a little bit later in the countdown. Alright, we're into the top 25 now, and starting it off, we've got WrestleMania 8. Now this is a very unique WrestleMania because for all intents and purposes, everything looks like in the time building up to this WrestleMania, we should be building up to the all-time dream match of Ric Flair versus Hulk Hogan. Ric Flair had recently jumped ship from WCW over to WWE. They were the two biggest stars of their era from the two different companies, so the chance to finally have them face off head-to-head on the biggest wrestling event there is just made so much sense. But the way Dave Meltzer, Wrestling Observer Newsletter, tells the story is that they ran some house shows with them facing off each other in the fall of that year leading up to WrestleMania, and there was a steady decline in the ticket sales for that, so that Vince decided there just wasn't as much interest in a Hogan-Ric Flair match as there seemed like there should have been, which is just weird to me. I still don't fully understand how that happened, because it's the two biggest stars of all time, should have been a bigger deal, but like there was always this thing when like where WWE always made WCW guys when they came over seem lesser than what they had been in WCW, so that probably hurt Ric Flair's drawing power when he came over. But ultimately what should have been that match ended up being two separate matches, where the main event was Hulk Hogan versus Sid Justice, Psycho Sid, Sid Vicious, whatever you want to call him, in a match that wasn't for the title. It was just a revenge match from the Royal Rumble. And the world title match between Ric Flair and Macho Man Randy Savage was like only like fourth or fifth along the show. The most significant moment of this, and why I have it probably a little higher than maybe it deserves, is it's one of the all-time crowd pops, music hit, music drop, return moments. Hulk Hogan's getting double teamed by all the heels. Sid, Papa Shango's out there. And all of a sudden, the Warriors music hits, the crowd goes nuts. Gorilla Monsoon's like, wait a minute, it's the Warrior! He comes in doing his full-blown crazy sprint thing. It's like an all-time moment. It's one of the ones I like rewatch from time to time when I want to hear a really cool crowd pop. So that probably makes this one ranked higher than maybe it should be. But yeah, WrestleMania 8. Coming in at number 24, and this is the second time I've done this, and neither time was intentional, just comes out weird. I've got WrestleMania 24 ranked number 24. Most significant thing from this one, the most memorable moment, and this honestly would probably have moved this one up the rankings if he hadn't come back 100 bajillion times, but it was Ric Flair's retirement match. Realistically, the perfect ending to his career right there. I'm sorry, I love you, sweet chin music, it's done, it's dusted. We get the next night, leave the memories alone on Monday Night Raw, but Ric Flair has made 100 comebacks since then. I got to see his last match here in Nashville last summer. But yeah, it was a huge moment at the time, but it's kind of been lessened over the years since he's come back and come out of retirement several times. We had Orton, Cena, Triple H, Triple Threat. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a period where like those three guys and a couple others seem to be in every main event of every pay-per-view, including WrestleMania. We had Big Show, Floyd Mayweather was kind of like your celebrity match on this show. And the actual main event on this one was Edge versus Undertaker, which was a really good match as I recall, but the Flair thing was the most significant thing, and it's kind of lost a little bit of his luster as the years have gone on because Ric Flair just kept on wrestling and kept seeming worse and worse and worse that he was keeping to wrestle. So WrestleMania 24, number 24. Number 23 on the list, we're going just 1 year into the past, WrestleMania 38. Overall, pretty good show, but I think what really like made me put this one a little lower on the list was that it was the like 7 bajillionth Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns main event. They spiced it up a little bit by making it a title unification match to kind of bring the separate titles, Universal and WWE Championship, together for the first time in a while. But I was just so sick of seeing those two guys wrestle each other. And once again, I got to see them wrestle each other live at SummerSlam last summer again. But for whatever reason, that just became Vince McMahon's go-to match for every big show, as he had to put Lesnar versus Reigns for a stretch there. Also had Stone Cold Steve Austin's return match after the first time since WrestleMania 19, which turned out to be a great, no holds barred brawl with Kevin Owens. Had maybe the worst WrestleMania match of all time between Vince McMahon and Pat McAfee. The worst Stone Cold Stunner of all time, possibly, of Stone Cold on Vince McMahon after that match. Cody Rhodes' big return to WWE last year. Everybody kind of knew it was that, but the moment that music hit, it was a huge pop, huge moment. And then, so funny to look back now of where he's been at this year. Sami Zayn last year was in a comedy match, losing to Johnny Knoxville at WrestleMania. And now he's arguably the biggest babyface, potentially maybe should have been the guy to knock off Roman Reigns in WWE now, but a year ago he was in a comedy match against Johnny Knoxville. So it was a good show, but like I said, I think that just bajillionth Reigns versus Lesnar match just brought it down a notch for me. Number 22. I will say in regards to this one and a few of the other WrestleManias that have come in low, I think some of the older WrestleManias are maybe hurt in my rankings because I'm very aware and very, very familiar with like the main event, the most significant thing that happened there, but like the kind of undercard stuff, doesn't resonate with me the way it maybe resonates to somebody who was watching actively at the time, who was following the brand. Like, if you were big into Dino Bravo or Tito Santana, you might rate these WrestleManias higher than I rate them, because I'm kind of going to lay these older WrestleManias on how significant the main event was, how many memorable moments there were from that WrestleMania. And with WrestleMania 5, it's only got really one significant thing that sticks, but arguably it's one of the most, significant, important, huge matchups in WrestleMania history. It's the Mega Powers exploding. It's the huge team, the unstoppable team of Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. A great, multi-year story of them kind of uniting, coming together. Jealousy over the world title, jealousy over Miss Elizabeth, breaking them apart. The Mega Powers implode, and they finally go head-to-head. WrestleMania 5. Some debate of whether maybe Savage should have got the big win here. It could have elevated him to another level even. But ultimately, Hogan is always going to be the guy that won back in that era. He was just such a draw. He was such a huge deal. You always hear people talk, like, back in that era, like, I'm always going to reference Dave Meltzer, because he's like my #1 news source when it comes to wrestling stuff. But he always says, like, people can't, fully understand how big Hogan was then. But even he said a few times he maybe thinks WWE should have maybe gone with Savage for a little while longer there, because Savage was drawing, Savage was doing well as champion. There wasn't necessarily a need to take the belt off him and go back to Hogan, but it was always Hogan in that era. So that's kind of the main thing from this show, but because it's such a huge, significant thing in wrestling history, it bumps this one up a little bit, even though that's kind of the only main attraction from that WrestleMania. So. At number 21, I have WrestleMania 22, and I'm kind of looking over my notes that I have for this WrestleMania, and I'm kind of wondering why I ranked it as high as I did. Because it's John Cena versus Triple H, which was kind of at the peak of everybody was sick of Triple H, everybody was sick of John Cena, so it wasn't necessarily a main event I think most people want to see. I think the reason maybe I gave this a little extra credence is this is when Rey Mysterio won the World Heavyweight Championship. And so maybe like I was just like when I was doing the rankings, I kind of thought that was cool. It was awesome to see Rey Mysterio. It was such a significant moment. It like important moment in terms of it was kind of the first time on that big of a stage WWE lets somebody like Rey Mysterio have the big moment. You know, we don't probably get what happens at WrestleMania 30 without Rey Mysterio getting the chance at WrestleMania 22. You could make that argument there. So maybe I was giving that kind of significant landmark moment a little bit extra credence, but I'm kind of looking at it, I'm kind of like, I don't know why I have this as high as it is, but the rankings were already done before I started the video. I'm going off what I did beforehand. At 21, I have WrestleMania 22. Am I forgetting something from that WrestleMania? If I'm forgetting something from that WrestleMania that would have made me rank it higher, let me know in the comments down below. Okay, now I'm thinking maybe I ranked 22 where I ranked it because it's kind of tied to WrestleMania 23 because I've got WrestleMania 23 at number 20. And as I recall, the plan was to do Triple H, John Cena again at WrestleMania, which would have been a terrible idea, but Triple H got hurt in the build-up to WrestleMania that year, and HBK got the main event spot instead. And John Cena and HBK had an incredible match. It was the first time I remember actually thinking, you know, John Cena, you know, his character's a little hokey, he's a little, you know, goofy, but he had this really great match with HBK, and I was like, hey, this guy's not all bad. He's got something to him. So I think I ranked that a little bit higher because of that, because it was the first time it kind of made me think like, you know, Cena's not just like a complete like dolt, hokey goofball who's worthless. He's like, he had a good match. I wanted Shawn Michaels to win the match at that point in time. I thought it would have been a really good opportunity to give him one last big WrestleMania moment. This is like the peak of when he became Mr. WrestleMania, where every year, whatever match he was in, you knew it was going to be an awesome match. You were like signing on the dotted line, sign me up for the HBK match. So that helps it out a little bit too. Batista Undertaker had an awesome match at this WrestleMania, but obviously the biggest match on this WrestleMania, the biggest draw was, and how crazy is this looking back in time, Vince McMahon represented by Umaga, Donald Trump represented by Bobby Lashley, Stone Cold Steve Austin as the special guest referee, hair versus hair for Donald Trump and Vince McMahon. Vince loses, gets his head shaved. Donald Trump, future president of the United States, takes maybe even worse stunner that Vince McMahon took last year. Crazy. What a world. What a world we live in. WrestleMania 23. Alright, I'm going to do number 19 and number 18 together because these two kind of tie together. I kind of mentioned these two as two that would tie together with WrestleMania 27. At number 19, I've got WrestleMania 29, which was this is kind of, I maybe should have cycled these different just to make it more sense when I spoke about it, but WrestleMania 29 was Rock vs. Cena 2. This time, Rock was the defending WWE World Heavyweight Champion. Cena was coming for revenge after having lost to Rock the year before. We also had CM Punk versus Undertaker on this show. Kind of was the beginning of the end for CM Punk. You could just tell throughout this feud, you know, he was trying stuff, he was experimenting, but you know, this was kind of the end of his WWE tenure there at WrestleMania 29. I have this behind 28 because I think the first Rock Cena was better than the second Rock Cena. maybe because I got a little caught off guard by the finish of the first Rock Cena. And the second Rock Cena, it was very clear what was going to happen in that one, which was John Cena getting his win back over The Rock, winning the world title, getting the rub from The Rock, getting the, you know, passing of the torch type moment and all that good stuff. But like I said, just ahead of that, at 18, I've got WrestleMania 28. That was the first Rock Cena. I think I have, like I said, I think I have this one ranked a little bit higher because the the finish of Rock Cena 1 caught me off guard because I thought, oh, this is Rock's just one coming back for one match ever. He's going to put Cena over, pass the torch here. And then Rock won. And I was like, oh my God, The Rock won. And, you know, the next line of Raw, he came out and declared, I'm sticking around and I'm coming after the WWE Championship. So it was continuing this like multi-year story that I talked about had started with WrestleMania 27. You also had Triple H versus Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell at that one. Once again, HBK and Undertaker had to fight 2 WrestleManias in a row. So Triple H, of course, and Undertaker had to fight 2 WrestleManias in a row because Triple H has to do everything Shawn Michaels does. But it was a really good Hell in a Cell match. Had one of the all-time... Both the Triple H matches, I'll say this for Triple H. Both the Triple H matches had the first 2 moments in the history of them acknowledging the Undertaker's WrestleMania winning streak that I actually thought he might lose. Back at WrestleMania 27, Triple H hits a tombstone, does the Undertaker signature pin. You kind of thought, oh my God, is this how it's in? Kicked out, the whole crowd went nuts. Awesome moment. This one, insane moment. Shawn Michaels is a special guest referee in this match. Hits a super kick, Sweet Chin Music on Undertaker, which he turns right around into a pedigree. Hits the pedigree. 1, 2, Undertaker kicks out. You're like, holy hell, there's no way he's still alive. He ultimately wins the match. Streak goes on for at least another year. And they do this like signature moment because I think, you know, at that point in time, HBK was retired. Taker was each year at WrestleMania, wasn't sure if he was coming back for another one. And Triple H, even at that point in time, was pretty much working like 1 to 2 shows a year. So they kind of do this significant moment where they're like all carrying each other out and they're like standing on the stage like soaking in like their crowd applause. And you're kind of like, is this the last time for these 3 guys? Is this the last time for these 3 guys? Maybe it should have been because I don't know that any of them had like as good of a match as that one coming back after that. But that was it. And we also had the awesome, you know, and kind of disappointing because it kind of got shoved down because of all the other stuff. CM Punk, Chris Jericho match. At that point in time, they were probably like, Jericho's probably my all-time favorite wrestler, and at that point in time, CM Punk had become like into that echelon of guys I really liked. So great match. They had an awesome match. Their whole feud was awesome, but it was kind of disappointing to kind of see them in the world title match get kind of shoved to the side by these other more significant non-title matches in Rock and Cena and Taker and Triple H. But it is what it is. So that's 19, WrestleMania 29, 18, WrestleMania 28. Coming in at number 17, WrestleMania 16, aka WrestleMania 2000. This is like, you know, peak of my fandom. You know, WrestleMania like 14 through about 18 was where I was like hardcore in, watching every Raw, every pay-per-view, every single show. This one, you know, didn't really like fully like, you know, care who was on it. Was just super into it. We had a huge 4-way match. This is the main event where each of the competitors was represented by one of the McMahon family members. We had The Rock, Big Show, Mankind, and Triple H for Triple H's world title. Triple H retained the first time in WrestleMania history that a heel won the main event of WrestleMania, so it's significant in that regard. But the more significant thing that probably came out of this was it was the first Dudley's, Edge and Christian, Hardy Boys tag team ladder match. And they went on to, between the triple threat ladder match, that future TLC matches, kind of just changed the game in terms of like how insane tag team matches could get in wrestling history. This is significant because it's peak Attitude Era, but there's no Austin on the show because this is when he was out with a reoccurrence of the neck injury he sustained from Owen Hart years earlier. So I guess I give a little extra credit to WWE for putting on a good show when their biggest star of all of them wasn't available in Stone Cold Steve Austin. But it was kind of weird, you know, this is kind of maybe the first hint of Triple H married into the McMahon family and having a little bit of control where, you know, the natural happy ending that we've got of every WrestleMania ever would have been for The Rock or Mick Foley, the baby faces, one of them to win the world title. But for the first time ever, Triple H, all the power he has, he gets to be the first heel to ever win the main event at WrestleMania. Kind of makes you think. Yeah, but that's number 17, WrestleMania 2000, aka WrestleMania 16. Number 16 on the WrestleMania countdown is WrestleMania 32. I remember this being a fun show. I just remember like there being a lot of good moments. There's several moments that I'll go back and watch sometime, and I'm looking for a good wrestling pop from this one. We had Austin versus, Austin making his return to team up with HBK and Foley when they kind of came down and confronted the, what were they called? The League of Nations. Great stunner take by Kofi Kingston, or not Kofi Kingston, Xavier Woods in that situation. We had the first ever women's, not first ever, but the rechristening of the Divas title to the Women's Championship. Charlotte Flair wins that one for the first time ever. Of course, she's the chosen one there. We have Shane McMahon being a lunatic going flying off the top of the Hell in a Cell there. The Rock having like a 45-minute intro where he's got like a flamethrower. He gets to do, no. That wasn't that one. Was it? Yes, he gets like the 45-minute intro with the flamethrower, comes out, it's completely insanity, gets confronted by the Wyatt family, huge pop for that. He's outnumbered, he challenges Eric Rowan to a match, he beats Eric Rowan in like 3 seconds, like sets the record for like shortest WrestleMania match of all time. He's outnumbered by the Wyatt family. John Cena, who was out injured at the time, makes an unexpected return, huge pop. John Cena sucks there. So some fun moments there. The main event, Triple H versus Roman Reigns, another attempt to like, let's put Roman Reigns over, make him the big, so when they're still trying to make him like the big babyface hero champion that everybody just wants to see do so good. Took him a while to figure out what to do with that guy. It's crazy how things have changed since then, but pretty good WrestleMania for the moments. Once again, that Triple H Reigns main event was kind of poopy a little bit, so maybe that brings it down a little bit, but yeah, WrestleMania 32. Number 15, WrestleMania 26. The headliner of this one, the retirement of Shawn Michaels. Undertaker Shawn Michaels rematch from the year before. The 25 match was probably the better one, but this one gets a little bit of a bump because it was the final match of HBK's career. The retirement match. Once again, he came back later. We got John Cena versus Batista, the two biggest kind of stars of this era, like of this new era. Finally, first ever one-on-one WrestleMania match together, so that pumped up. And we also got, it wasn't a great match necessarily, but it was a significant match in terms of like, the build, the repair of certain relationships, things you never thought you'd see. Bret Hart versus Vince McMahon at WrestleMania in a no-holds-barred match. But yeah, this one's all about HBK. It's all about Shawn Michaels. Once again, this is probably bumped up a little bit higher if he hadn't come back and done that one match in Saudi Arabia, but still a great match. Two of the best WrestleMania matches in history are him and Undertaker. So this one comes in at number 15 because of that. Coming in at number 14 is WrestleMania 15. This was peak Attitude Era. Things were flying. Wrestling was on fire. WWE was as hot as it could possibly be. Stone Cold Steve Austin was the biggest star there could have possibly been in wrestling at the time. He's coming back to get his WWE Championship from the evil Rock, who had aligned with Vince McMahon and the corporation. Such well-built stories. Such good stuff back then. We had, that match obviously was the main event, the hugest match you could have there, but some of the other significant moments, infamous moments maybe, we had Hell in a Cell between The Undertaker and the Big Boss Man, which ended with The Undertaker hanging the Big Boss Man. That was a weird visual and one that I think, you wouldn't see these days, but one of the funniest moments in wrestling history happened to this one. WWE, this was around the advent of the time MMA was starting to kind of catch fire. Early days of MMA, not what we know now of UFC, where it was just full-on crazy strongman fights. So WWE did like a semi-worked, semi-shoot kind of MMA tournament called the Brawl for All between their actual wrestlers. Won by Bart Gunn, former tag team partner of Billy Gunn of the Smoking Guns. And his prize was he got to fight an actual, like, legit, like, knockout crazy boxing guy in Butterbean at WrestleMania. And it ended Bart Gunn's career because he got knocked out in like 2 seconds by Butterbean, and Bart Gunn was never heard from again. So WrestleMania 15, very memorable, very fun WrestleMania. At number 14 for 15. I've done it again. Swear this was not on purpose, but for the third time I have WrestleMania number ranking alignment. Number 13, I've got WrestleMania 13. This is another one where like I might be off in other people's rankings. I think other people would rank this one a little bit higher, but I think it gets a high ranking because it's got probably one of the best and one of the most significant matches in WrestleMania history on it. But outside of that, I don't think it has much of anything. So you've got your main event was Undertaker versus Sid Vicious. Very forgettable match at that point in time. I think that was kind of like the end of Sid in WWE at that point in time. You know, Taker was always better when he wasn't champion, when he was like more of like a mysterious attraction. Him as champion never quite worked quite right. You had Rock as Rocky Maivia as Intercontinental Champion, as the white meat babyface that nobody liked. It was his first WrestleMania. But obviously the big one from this one, Blood from a Stone, the submission match, Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. Quite possibly the best match in WrestleMania history. The match that really launched Stone Cold Steve Austin to the next level. It's always funny to me, like Stone Cold gives so much credit to Bret Hart for launching him, for giving him his boost, for creating his career. And in the two biggest matches he had with Bret Hart, first one at the Survivor Series, then at the WrestleMania, Bret Hart goes over in both of them. So Bret Hart never technically put Stone Cold Steve Austin over, but Stone Cold Steve Austin gives Bret nothing but praise for making him, for creating him. And you can see why, because in this match, this was like double turn. If you're not familiar with what that means, Bret Hart was the face coming in this match, the good guy. Stone Cold was the heel, the bad guy. And in the course of the match, Bret Hart got so desperate to beat Stone Cold, he started getting nasty. He started doing dirty tactics. He started just like desperately doing whatever he could to beat Austin. Austin refused to give up. He's trapped in the sharpshooter. He's bleeding blood from a stone, bleeding profusely. He won't tap out. He finally passes out. At the end of the match, the fans have turned on Bret Hart. They hate him for the dirty tactics he used to beat Stone Cold. They respect Stone Cold because he never gave up. You've got your new biggest babyface in WWE in Stone Cold Steve Austin. And Bret Hart is set to, for the first time in his career, be a big heel, which I think ultimately he was better as, in the long run, was as a heel than it was as a babyface. But that match is what really puts this one ahead of the rest, and not much else on the show, but that match was so good that it gets it that high up the countdown. WrestleMania 13 on the list. Alright, number 12, we're getting into the meat of their list, WrestleMania 21. This was the WrestleMania that would, like, in a lot of ways, was the changing of the guards. It was WWE kind of christening their new stars, their new guys are kind of taking over. You had John Cena beating JBL, who had a hugely long run as WWE champion. But the weird thing is, the more significant match at that point in time was Batista beating Triple H, his long-term mentor, for the World Heavyweight Champion. So it kind of seemed like they were setting up Batista to be the new top star, the new main guy for WWE. But within a few weeks after WrestleMania, it had flipped, and Cena was very clearly the new main guy. And I often kind of wonder, you know, because Cena, I was very negative on Cena at the time. Obviously, he had a huge impact on kids and everything he did with Make-A-Wish and stuff like that. But I think he had like a more negative impact on the older fan base, the Attitude Era people like myself who were still sticking around. Batista, I was never like a huge Batista guy, but I definitely at the time liked him better than John Cena. So I kind of wonder what would have happened if like they'd really like kept Batista as like the marquee name, the main guy. They kind of like kept them both up there, but it was clear Cena was 1A and Batista was kind of 1B or even kind of 1C. This also had Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels. Once again, this is in the stretch where whoever Shawn Michaels wrestled at WrestleMania was going to be an insane match. So when you put him with like somebody as good as Kurt Angle, obviously next level thing. When I talk about pops, like a lot of times I'll go back and watch old shows just to watch like the huge pops that happened. This one has a really great one. Muhammad Hassan, who was your typical negative heel terrorist character at the time, is beating up Eugene, who is a, this is crazy, this is only like a few years ago. We'll call him a slow character. He was getting beat up. He was a slow character who was a huge fan of all the nostalgia, all the old wrestlers. He's getting beat down by Muhammad Hassan, the terrorist. And who should show up to save Eugene but newly christened, newly brought back into the fold after a little bit of a time away, American legend, Hulk Hogan. He's getting choked out by Muhammad Hassan. Bam, 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 bam. I am a real American. This was WrestleMania Goes Hollywood, which is interesting because we're about to go Hollywood again for this year's WrestleMania. Hogan returns, huge pop, awesome moment. Other big significant thing from this WrestleMania, it was the first Money in the Bank ladder match. Edge wins it, and now this has become just like a key part of the lore, key part of the trajectory of WWE is the Money in the Bank ladder match, and it started at WrestleMania 21, so that helps get this one a little bit higher up the list. All right, we're up to number 11 on the countdown, and this one is kind of similar to when the Mega Powers exploded. This one is all about one match, and I give this one a little bit more significance because I remember this is the first time I remember significantly being aware of WrestleMania as a kid, and it's WrestleMania 6, the Ultimate Challenge. Intercontinental Champion, Ultimate Warrior versus WWE World Heavyweight Champion, Hulk Hogan. Two biggest stars, two just like larger than life superhero looking dudes. I remember as a kid hearing about it, seeing the posters. I don't think I watched it live at the time, but I remember being very aware of the fact that like these two guys were huge. They were like superheroes come to life. I was a big comic book kid when I was big into comic books when I was a kid. Still big into comic books today. Probably do some vlogs about that in the future at some point in time. But huge matchup, the two main guys that I knew at a time when I wasn't really into wrestling. So this is one that always resonated with me, and as I've watched it in the years subsequent, it's always been a really interesting one to me. Now kind of being a fan of wrestling and now growing up and kind of like following the kind of business side, the kind of backstage stuff of wrestling, how Hulk Hogan strategically halfway almost kicked out right when Warrior was about to get the three count. Just didn't kick out in time, then kind of paraded around the ring, made sure he was still in the spotlight. There's a little bit of like, he didn't really want to pass the torch to Warrior kind of thing. He wanted to make sure he was still there going like, oh, how did I lose? And then he kind of did the handshake, handed the belt over, kind of still made it by himself. That stuff's really interesting me going forward. But like, I think for the nostalgia, for this being the first WrestleMania, I really remember being aware of. It gets it a little bump up some of the other ones, like the Mega Powers exploding one. So, at number 11, WrestleMania 6. We're almost there. Top 10. Let's get into it. Number 10, WrestleMania 20. And this is a hard one to talk about. This is a hard one to rank because the significant thing from it, the thing that should be so much more memorable for so many different reasons, was Chris Benoit winning the main event over Triple H and Shawn Michaels. A really great match, an all-time triple threat match, and it's just so hard to watch, so hard to look back on it because of the tragedy that happened with Chris Benoit, the awful acts he committed. You know, he's basically stricken from the record books there, but you know, at the time, it was a significant WrestleMania. It was him, Eddie Guerrero, that moment of them both being the dual world champions in the ring together at the end of the show. It's just tragic to look back on it now for so many reasons. But also, this one also has one of like the funniest, hilarious moments. It's maybe the first example of crowds, and this became a thing. It's been a while since we've seen this, but like for a stretch, this became a very significant thing in wrestling, was crowds hijacking the show. You had Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar on the show for the first time ever. A significant, like, potential dream match. Just like Goldberg, the, you know, warrior, just monster from WCW. Brock Lesnar, who'd been booked very similar to Goldberg in his time with WWF, going head to head. It was in New York City, Madison Square Garden. New York City fans get credit for being the, you know, the smart fans, really in the know, knowing what's going on behind the scenes. And the whole crowd there was very aware that Goldberg was not re-signing with WWE. This was going to be his last match. That Brock Lesnar had asked for his release from WWE because he wanted to pursue the NFL. And so we had this big significant match with these two just behemoths, which should have been like a huge marquee electric match that the fans would be so excited for. Throw in the mix, Stone Cold Steve Austin was once again going to be the special guest referee. So you've got three of the biggest stars of the last 20 years all in the ring together. And the fans crapped all over it because they knew both these guys were leaving. They were chanting, na 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 na, hey, goodbye. They were booing the match. They were just like all over both guys. The only person in the match they cared about was Stone Cold Steve Austin. Goldberg wins the match. He does, like, you know, Austin stuns Lesnar and kicks him out. Goldberg and Austin do, you know, their little beer thing. How we never got Goldberg versus Stone Cold Steve Austin is just like the money that could have been made if that match had ever been put together. Unbelievable. Wasted opportunity. But the closest we got was them in the ring together after Goldberg beat Lesnar, doing beer toes, stringing the beer. Austin stuns Goldberg. Everybody's like, get out of here, Goldberg. Boo him. Crazy. Super memorable. Kind of that, you know, crazy moment. But obviously that Mania has the sad stigma of, you know, not only, you know, the Benoit thing, but also, you know, it's hard to watch the Eddie Guerrero celebration too because he tragically passed away so young. But it was a great Mania at the time, you know. Is it fair to rank it because of, you know, that stuff? I don't know, but I did. I got it at number 10. We're into the top 10. Number 9. And you want to talk about WrestleMania moments. WrestleMania, you know, we can talk about match quality. We can talk about, like, stardom. WrestleMania, to me, is about the moments. That's what separates WrestleMania from just your standard run-of-the-mill wrestling show, is you remember stuff from WrestleMania. And if there's a moment that you can remember, like, it just rockets that WrestleMania up so much. And this one has arguably one of the greatest moments of WrestleMania history. Hulk Hogan versus The Rock. Hulk Hogan's big return after years in WCW. He returned as a part of the NWO, re-invading WWE now. There's just Toronto crowd going nuts for him. He's supposed to be the bad guy, and they're going insane to see Hogan there because he'd been such a huge star in Canada back in the day for WWE. Just The Rock, they're looking, Hogan's looking, they're just soaking it in. They don't even touch, they're just sitting there soaking in the reaction. That first moment when they lock up and Hogan throws Rock to the ground and then hulks up and the crowd's like, yes! That match was just unbelievable. The moments, I mean, it wasn't a great, like, technical wrestling match, but just the moments from that match were just so significant. Speaking of moments, Scott Hall, legendary Stone Cold Stunner cell in that match that he had with Stone Cold on this show. Just two things I'll never forget is the Hogan Rock stuff, the stunner that Scott Hall sold. Scott Hall, one of my all-time favorites. Sad thing about this is, once again, Y2J, one of my all-time favorites, the first ever undisputed World Heavyweight Champion, defending against Triple H in the main event. One of the few times where there was clearly like a more significant match and they still went with their gut and put the world title on last. Jericho and Triple H for the world title did not get the love it deserved because people were just so burned out from Hogan and Rock after that. They just couldn't follow that, and sucks for Jericho because I love Jericho. And it kind of sucks for Triple H too because, like, Triple H, he had been on this crazy big return from an injury. He'd been like huge pop, huge return. And then Hogan and them came back a few months later and kind of killed his momentum. He ends up he drops the belt to Hogan a month later because how hot Hogan got. He ends up turning heel, and his whole, like, big, I'm Triple H, I'm back, I'm a huge babyface thing just dies within a month of WrestleMania. But in that moment, in that night, this was a great WrestleMania. Number 8, we go back to the beginning, WrestleMania 1. It would have been impossible to not have this one in the top 10 just because it's ultimately, there's no way it cannot be the most significant, you know, WrestleMania there is because it sets the stage for everything that is to come. You know, arguably WWE dies if this one isn't a success, but they poured everything they had into this. The main event, historic, you know, legendary. Piper, Hogan, Orndorff, Mr. T, Cowboy Bob Orton's out there with the cast he wore for 75 years. Crazy match, you know, just Mr. T, that audience that he brought in. Now, I don't think, like, we can, like, people of my age can really appreciate, like, what, like, the celebrities did there because, you know, I don't know if there's anybody that, like, we got Logan Paul right now coming in WWE, and I don't know how much he's bringing in, but, like, at that point in time, somebody like Mr. T was, like, 70 million people were watching the A-Team, and they find out Mr. T's gonna be on another show. They're like, oh, what's this WrestleMania thing that Mr. T's gonna be on? I gotta watch that. Huge success. Also Muhammad Ali, Cyndi Lauper, Liberace. What a thing it was. What a thing it was, and it's what we owe everything we're doing right now to WrestleMania 1, number 8 on the countdown. Number 7, WrestleMania 12. This one has one big match on it, but there's a lot of other stuff underneath that I'll always remember that I always thought was really cool. Starting off with Roddy Piper, Goldust, the backlot brawl. Just an absolutely hilarious match. Just an absolutely, like, they didn't have like hardcore matches yet. This was kind of the advent of hardcore matches, and for it to have been like a legend of the past, like one of the old school legends in Roddy Piper versus like this weird, new, bizarre, just like what is he even doing character in Goldust, brutally beating each other all over the place, running each other with cars, finishing with Roddy Piper stripping Goldust down, and he's wearing like lingerie and a weird thong. It's just like crazy match, crazy thing. The hardcore ECW, you know, the hardcore title, the, you know, everything we see now, GCW, a lot of it, you know, there's other, you know, things like FMW and stuff like that, but like on a big scale like this was the first time we saw something like this, and it was crazy. You had the return of the Ultimate Warrior after a long time having fallen out with WWE, and an all-time incredible moment. And I think it's one of the moments that shaped who Triple H was in terms of never letting anybody get it over on him, always trying to put himself over, always trying to make sure he was on top. He hits the pedigree on the Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior immediately stands up and is like, nope, don't care. Awesome moment, great moment. Undertaker versus Diesel, good big man match. The end of Diesel in WWE, his last significant match before becoming Kevin Nash and jumping over to WCW. And then obviously the most significant match on the show, the Iron Man match. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, one of the all-time rivalries in WWE history. The most, you know, outside of the controversial one that's not a WrestleMania match, their most significant match. Two guys, two great performers going for an hour. The final finale, sweet chin music, the boyhood dream comes true. Shawn Michaels' entrance, like zip-lining down from the rafters. Unforgettable moments in every highlight reel you'll ever see of WrestleMania, and for good reason. WrestleMania 12 comes in at number 7. Number 6, WrestleMania 3. This is probably the one that WWE probably promotes the most, that they probably put the most over as being like the most significant moment, and it's because it's one of the signature moments that they, you know, celebrate the most. It's Hogan, Andre, and this is probably more than WrestleMania 1, more than any of the early WrestleManias, the one that really cemented what WrestleMania was, because they sold out the Pontiac Silverdome. You know, they've, you know, obviously fudged the numbers a little bit over the years, you know, said it was, oh, we had 700 million people in the arena. I think the actual number is closer to like 78,000, which is still insane for, you know, that match at that point in time. But it shows you like how significant Hogan was, how significant Andre was to draw that level of a house, to get people in there for there. The slam, the leg drop, Andre losing, huge. This also had what for a long time what was considered one of the best matches in WWE was the Randy Savage Ricky Steamboat match. So those two matches, just all-time historic matches in WWE history. It has to be on the list for that reason. It has to be, you know, you could argue, I think some people would put it higher. I think you get a little bit of the WWE sprinkle dust on it, that they rated a little bit higher than some of the earlier WrestleManias. But for me, you have to have it high for those reasons. But I think there's definitely more WrestleManias that were better, and we're going to get into those next. Here we are, top 5. We're almost home. They're giving me the go home signal off screen, so I got to keep going. I got to push through. Number 5, WrestleMania 10. Back to the Garden, back to Madison Square Garden, where the first WrestleMania was, where WrestleMania 20 would eventually be. They've gone away from that. WrestleMania 30 was somewhere else. We'll get to that eventually. But we've got several significant matches on the show. We've got an awesome Bret Hart versus Owen Hart match. Multiple people are working multiple times on the show. We've got Yokozuna, Lex Luger. We've got Bret Hart later beating Yokozuna to win the world title. And then obviously the one everybody remembers, the first hugely significant, hugely notable ladder match. What has happened with the ladder match lineage in the years since just kind of blows this one out of the water. It's like not as crazy watching it back now, but at the time, Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, this ladder match was revolutionary, completely changed the game. This was definitely like where, after the disaster, you know, like I said, it's not as bad to me, but most people consider WrestleMania 9 to be kind of a flop, a kind of a disaster. this was a bounce back in the right direction. They would drop back off the next year in WrestleMania 11, but I think that would more had to do with like Vince not fully trusting his top stars, you know, with Brett and stuff like that. Even in this show, you can see that Vince just could not fully commit because he had kind of started to build Lex Luger up as like the new Hulk Hogan. He made him this big patriot guy who was coming after Yokozuna, but he still liked Yokozuna, so he wouldn't let Lex Luger beat Yokozuna back at SummerSlam. So we had a whole long build of Lex Luger coming back, trying to get another shot at Yokozuna. He gets it, loses by disqualification. But before we even came into the match, we knew that both Lex Luger and Bret Hart were both going to challenge for the world title on this show because they had dually won the Royal Rumble a few months earlier. So it's almost like Vince knew what he had in Bret, wanted to maybe hopefully have more out of Lex Luger, so he put them both in a spot to where he could make the decision who was going to go over, who he's really going to go with. It'd be interesting to see if he went back in time, if he like fully like embraced Lex Luger and said like, you're the Patriot, you're the big muscle guy, you're going to be the new Hulk Hogan. If he'd let Lex Luger win either at SummerSlam or here at WrestleMania, what would have happened? What would the course of wrestling be? I don't know. But this was a very fun WrestleMania, obviously, so deservingly it comes in at number 5. Number 4, and this is where I'm definitely going to differ from a lot of the consensus, because what I have at number 4 is what you will see on a lot of people's list as the best WrestleMania of all time. But for me, I've got it at number 4. It's WrestleMania 17. It was when WWE first started piercing the, you know, kind of bridge of going back into stadiums for WrestleMania after a few years in arenas. Went to the Astrodome in Houston. The third match in the trilogy between Austin and The Rock for the world title. We were fresh off just learning that Vince McMahon had bought WCW, so the seeds of the invasion were being planted. We had the second TLC and probably the better TLC match between, once again, the Hardys, the Dudley Boys, and Edge and Christian. Absolutely incredible, sick match. We weirdly had the first Triple H Undertaker match that we would see replayed twice many years later, and it was a really great match of this, but just everything on the show was awesome. The matches were all good. It was highly entertaining. Why I probably put it a little bit lower than a lot of people who say it's the best WrestleMania of all time is because the end of the show sees Stone Cold Steve Austin. The whole storyline was that he was just desperate, coming back from his neck injury that had sidelined him for the last year. As I mentioned, WrestleMania 16, WrestleMania 2000, he was out of action. He's desperate to get back. He's desperate to be the world champion again. The Rock's not really a heel anymore. He's kind of like a tweener, but more of a baby face. So it's more of a face versus face. But it's the story of The Rock's like, I'm the guy. I've been the guy since you've been gone. Austin's been like, this is all I've been fighting to come back from my injury. Great storyline, great match. But for whatever reason, they decided they had to do something bigger. They had to make a bigger twist. They couldn't just let it be these two top guys fighting for the top title. They decided to have Austin turn heel and align with his greatest enemy of all time, Vince McMahon. Now, Austin has said 100 times since then, if he had to do it all over again in the ring when he shook Vince McMahon's hand and realized what a bad decision it was, he would have caught an audible right there in the moment, stunned Vince McMahon, taken the title, and acted like it was all a ruse. But they didn't do that. They went with Austin as a heel for like the next year or so. Business went off a cliff. It derailed from there. So for that reason, I can't make this the best WrestleMania of all time, when that one moment that ended that WrestleMania probably led to a huge decline. Now, here's the thing. That's been attributed to like a big decline, the end of the Attitude Era, the kind of falling off of wrestling. But like, I think if they better executed the invasion angle, and this is a whole other story for a whole other day, but they kind of botched the WCW invasion because they didn't bring in the top WCW stars when they did the invasion. Had they brought in the top stars, I think that could have salvaged the Austin heel turn what it did, but they didn't, so it didn't. So the heel turn kind of sours this WrestleMania a little bit for me, but it is a great WrestleMania. There's no doubt about it. That's why I have it at number 4. Here we go. Top 3. Number 3, WrestleMania 31. This show, top to bottom, had so many crazy moments, So many awesome matches, so much cool stuff. Like, it's hard not to put it higher, but like, we're into the nitty gritty. We're into the best of the best here. You've got the all-time RKO, the Seth Rollins Randy Orton match, the Stomp reversed into an RKO, best RKO of all time. Sting's WWE debut, maybe not the best technical match in the world, but the surprises that came with DX coming out, with the NWO coming out. Should Triple H have won the match? No, but it is what it is. Triple H. This seems to be a running theme of this video, is me getting mad about Triple H winning matches he probably shouldn't have won. But still, the match, the cinematography, the whole thing that went into that match was great. John Cena versus Rusev, like the entrances there, the Rusev coming in the tank, it was so epic. We had Rousey jumping the rail to join The Rock to go confront Stephanie McMahon and Triple H in the ring. Absolutely electric moment. That was so insane. I really wish we would have got Rock and Rousey versus Triple H and Stephanie instead of Kurt Angle and Rousey versus Triple H and Stephanie, but that's a whole nother story. And then, of course, the main event. The main event nobody wanted. Everybody was so sour on it. WWE was clearly setting up Roman Reigns to get his big win over Brock Lesnar, to be christened as the new big star of WWE. Everybody hated it. He and The Rock together got booed out of the building a few months earlier at the Royal Rumble in Philadelphia when he won. Nobody wanted to see Roman Reigns win the world title here. WWE was stuck between a rock and a hard place, where Lesnar was on a very limited schedule there. He had to drop the title essentially because you weren't going to see him again until SummerSlam, and they'd already had him barely around as the champion, so somebody had to beat him. Genius. One of the last genius moves of Vince McMahon. Seth Rollins, who had several months earlier won the Money in the Bank briefcase, late in the match between Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, runs out, huge pop, cashes in. He wins the match because it becomes a triple threat match. He's the new world champion. Nobody knows what's happening. He's going nuts. The crowd is just like stunned. Nobody saw it coming, even though it should have been very obvious looking back that, hey, what's the easy way to get out of this? We got this Money in the Bank guy. Let's have him cash in. Epic moment, epic match. That whole show, Daniel Bryan's big return after having been out for an injury to win the Intercontinental title, and sadly, I think he immediately went back out injured after that. But yeah, that was an awesome WrestleMania, just like step by step by step by step. Everything that happened on that show was awesome. Really great setup. It was cool how it was in Santa Clara, San Francisco, whatever you want to call it, in an outdoor stadium. So anytime they're in an outdoor stadium on the West Coast and like half the show is in the daylight, it always kind of looks kind of cool. So awesome WrestleMania, awesome. Like, really, these top three for me, you could kind of interchange them. I have different reasons why I decided which one would be which one, but I think all three of these are just like immensely rewatchable, immensely awesome shows. But for the purposes of this video, I have WrestleMania 31 ranked at number 3. All right, so if you're keeping track, you can figure out what is left on the countdown. We've got 2 left, and you can figure out which 2 WrestleManias are left. Can you guess which one I have in which order? Take a second, make your guesses. Here we go. At number 2 on the all-time WrestleMania countdown list, I have WrestleMania 14. This is the WrestleMania, this is the show that locked me in as a 100% forever wrestling fan. It will be almost impossible for anything to ever make me completely turn away from wrestling. I mentioned earlier there was times I kind of phased out, but like I was always slightly aware of what was going on in the world of wrestling, whether I was actively watching or not, but it was because of this show. This was the one that sealed the deal. So, rewind back to fall of 1997. I got a buddy, he's really into wrestling. He's like, hey, you need to start watching Monday Night Raw. This stuff's, it's really cool now. You gotta watch Monday Night Raw. And I'm like, all right, I'll tune in. You know, I don't have a whole lot else, you know, to do. I'll watch Raw on Monday nights. So I start watching, and the reason he tells me to watch is because he's like, there's this guy, Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's awesome. He's like the coolest guy. You gotta watch this. You gotta watch this. You gotta watch this. So I start watching Raw a little bit. I've been following along. Buddy invites me over to his house. He's like, hey, I'm getting the Royal Rumble. You gotta come over and watch the Royal Rumble. Come over, watch the Royal Rumble. I come over, watch the Royal Rumble. Stone Cold wins the Royal Rumble. Stone Cold, Stone Cold, Stone Cold is going to WrestleMania. The famous Jim Ross call. So then I'm like, all right, I'm in with this guy. This guy's cool. I like what his vibe is. I'm gonna keep following. So I watch all the Raws, I watch all the build. We get to WrestleMania 14, Stone Cold Steve Austin, the 15-year journey. He's going for his first ever World Heavyweight Championship after going through everything. You got Shawn Michaels, the brash kind of a-hole dude, just like had everything handed to him. He, kind of, screwed Bret Hart over. He hates everybody. He's Degeneration X. He's telling everybody to suck it. He's the guy. Stone Cold is ready to come get the title. They have the match. Mike Tyson comes into the picture. He's all involved. There's all these brawls. Mike Tyson and Shawn Michaels. Mike Tyson versus Austin. Tyson's at Austin. Tyson's going for Austin. Austin and Tyson. Austin and Tyson. Everything's Jim Ross. I'm just doing Jim Ross impressions all the time now on the channel. And it ultimately culminates with a significant moment. It's a little... Tyson kind of botched the count, but whatever. Austin wins. He's christened. The world title's there. The Attitude Era officially begins. But beyond that, this was I still look at this WrestleMania as the ultimate WrestleMania in terms of how to build matches. Every match on the card had a really good, really significant month to 2 month to 3 month to 4 month build. You had the culmination of Rock and Shamrock on this card for the Intercontinental title. They've been feuding for 3 or 4 months. You had Owen Hart versus Triple H, which had dated back to the Survivor Series in November. You had Taker and Kane, which went back to Bad Blood in the fall. So you had all these matches that had been being built since August, September, October, November, finally culminated in these final matches at WrestleMania. And in my mind, that's still the way WrestleMania should be. You start the build in October and September, do what you got to do, get there at WrestleMania, finish everything off at WrestleMania. This was the perfect example of that to me. And this is kind of always in my mind when I'm oh, what should they do this year? How should they book this? This is kind of always the template I follow, was what they did this year. And that's probably because it was my first WrestleMania that I was fully 100% invested in, fully 100%. I'm here, I'm there, I'm all for this. I can't wait to watch this. And every match just had an was an appointment deal. It was all these were so well built. Everything was so significant. It was so awesome. But it was mostly, the crowning of Stone Cold Steve Austin, the official christening of him as the new biggest star, the Attitude Era officially being shepherded in. Great WrestleMania. It was honestly tough not to put it number one, but what I have at number one is just, I can't go against it. It's my favorite WrestleMania moments, my favorite WrestleMania stuff. Let's just get to it. Let's go. Number one. We've done it. We've reached the top of the countdown. The best WrestleMania of all time. If you're checking the boxes off as we go, you know where we're at. You already know what we're coming to. The number one WrestleMania of all time is WrestleMania 30. I've got this at number one for two big reasons. There's two huge, just all-time significant moments in this WrestleMania. There's probably more that I'm not even going to mention, but I'm just going to highlight the two that just put it head and shoulders above everything else. Was number one, the streak ends. At this point in time, I think we pretty much accepted that The Undertaker was going to win every match he ever wrestled at WrestleMania, because somewhere along the way he'd won, what was it, 21? Was he 21-0 at this point in time? I should look this up for research purposes, but he was 21-0. It was around 18, 17, 16, 15-0, somewhere there, where they actually because it wasn't always supposed to be a thing. They just kind of realized, oh, wait a minute, we've never had The Undertaker lose at WrestleMania. And they started making a big deal out of it. So it always seemed significant that, he was going to win. Whoever he wrestled, he was going to win. And he was wrestling Brock Lesnar at this one. And Brock Lesnar was not somebody that, if you understand the way wrestling works, there's, people that need to win matches. If you want to elevate a guy, if you want to move them forward, you want to push them up the card, you have them win a significant match. And Brock Lesnar was a made man for all intents and purposes. Nothing he could do, was going to hurt him. He's always going to be a star. He's always going to be a big deal. It would be very difficult to put down Brock Lesnar, to bury Brock Lesnar. He's a star. He doesn't need to win a match to be elevated. So when they announced for WrestleMania 30 that Brock Lesnar and Undertaker were going to face off, you thought, it's going to be a good match. It's going to be a fun match. These are two guys. This is a match that's been teased, going back to when Brock Lesnar was still in UFC, and they kind of had a little face-to-face at a UFC show. So it was fun in that regard, but you just thought, Taker's going to win. He's going to move on. if Taker was ever going to lose, it was going to be like a young guy on the rise, like Roman Reigns eventually. It wasn't going to be like an established made man like Brock Lesnar or Triple H or Shawn Michaels. And as the match goes, they're fighting, they're battling, you know, Undertaker kicks out of a couple F5s, there's some choke slams. I don't know if he ever hit a tombstone, but, you know, it's a little back and forth, you know, Lesnar's, you know, doing his usual dominant stuff. And then he finally hits like a third straight F5, hooks the leg, 1, 2, 3, and the whole building is silent. 70,000 people in the Superdome in New Orleans, dead silence. I mean, you can look up the meme guy, the face, just say yes, white t-shirt guy, just locked in time forever, the frozen face that The Undertaker lost that match to Brock Lesnar. And it's one where, like, in the moment, I was like, this was so stupid. There was no reason for Undertaker to lose this match. It was so dumb. But ultimately, and The Undertaker said it since, like, he thought that was probably his last WrestleMania. And like we talked about, like, earlier, it even seemed like in the last Triple H match, the way they ended that, at that time, Undertaker thought he might have been done then. So, in the moment, it made sense. And I think long-term, it's probably been more significant than it, you know, would have been for him to beat Brock Lesnar, because that was just such an all-time moment. Just the shock on everybody's face, the whole arena being quiet. And there's a great, like, double reaction moment where 1, 2, 3, the whole crowd's just silent. And there's almost like a wait, like there has to be like some kind of twist. This has to be like a dusty finish. They're gonna announce something like the referee wasn't the real referee, or something's gonna happen. And then on the video boards, they put up 21 and 1, and the whole crowd is like, holy sh! You just hear this, like, it's not like a pop, it's not like a cheer, it's just like a, oh my God, this is real. We really just saw this moment. And for that reason, I mean, like, that reason alone, this could be the best WrestleMania of all time, just for that significant of a moment. But what really pushes it over the edge, what really moves us to number 1, is the Daniel Bryan show. Daniel Bryan had been on fire for the better part of the last year. Like, the fans got so behind him. You know, he stole the show in Seattle. There's so much that you can go back and look at that's just awesome, of how, like, just he was so good. The fans got behind him. They were so excited to see him, and they just would not let. This is, we talked about earlier, how the crowd kind of hijacked the show at WrestleMania 20. The fans hijacked this program, because the plan for this WrestleMania was Batista was coming back after having taken a year or so off. He won the Royal Rumble. He was going to go beat Randy Orton for the world title at WrestleMania. But the fans did not want that. They wanted Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan had won the world title, gotten screwed out of it the year before at SummerSlam. Pushed to the side, was tried to move out of the picture, but the fans just were relenting. Every show they would do the yes chants nonstop. They were chanting for Daniel Bryan nonstop. They just would not let WWE move away from Daniel Bryan. And finally WWE had to relent. And when they finally relented, they did it in the best way possible. They gave Daniel Bryan 2 matches on the show. First of all, he had to beat Triple H in the opening match of the show to earn his way into making the main event a triple threat between him, Batista, and Randy Orton. And the Triple H Daniel Bryan match is one of the all-time best matches in WrestleMania history on its own. He wins it. He goes on in the main event, and then the main event itself is so freaking awesome, because you get to that point of that main event. Once Daniel Bryan's in it, you're like, okay, they bought in. They're going to have him go over. There's no way they're going to put him in this match and have him lose. But they still found a way in the construction of the match to find a way to trick you into thinking that Daniel Bryan was going to lose. Because there's one moment, Daniel Bryan hits the knee, Batista comes in, throws Daniel Bryan out of the ring, he pins Randy Orton, you're like, oh my God, this is how it goes down. This is how Batista wins, stealing the pin from Daniel Bryan. Orton kicks out, Batista hits a Batista bomb, Bryan's back in, hits the knee on Batista, and then the shockingness, most crazy thing about it was, he doesn't pin Batista. He locks the yes lock in on Batista, and Batista taps out. 70,000 people go nuts. Michael Cole christens it the Miracle on Bourbon Street. All-time epic moment. All-time great moment. Sadly, whatever was going to happen with Daniel Bryan got cut short because he had some injury issues coming after that. But in that moment, on that night, WrestleMania with 30 was epic. Funny little backstory. Friday before that WrestleMania 30, it's in New Orleans. Me and a buddy are texting. We're like, hey man, are you excited for WrestleMania this weekend? Blah, 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 blah. We're just talking through it. We're like, well, could we go? We're like, it's in New Orleans. I mean, it's not like, you know, necessarily adjacent to Nashville, but it's not like going to California or something like that. So we're so close, and we're like talking about, we're like, well, I think I can maybe get out of work Monday if we go. Like, oh, we're like so close to like saying, let's do it, let's go, and just never got it over the line. We're just never like fully committed, like, let's do it, let's go. We're just like, it'd be too hard, it's too last minute. Ultimately didn't pull the trigger on it. Probably couldn't afford it. It probably was financially a smart decision to not have pulled the trigger on it, but man, would have been pretty sick to have like been there that night for what I have ranked as the #1 WrestleMania of all time. Alright, so that's going to do it. We have ranked every single WrestleMania there is to rank. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you disagree with? What do you agree with? You know, did I miss some moments? What are your favorite WrestleMania moments? What did I miss? You know, just tell me in the comments down below, because this was all just kind of off the cuff, me just kind of going through my brain, my memories of WrestleMania. What is your favorite WrestleMania? What is your least favorite WrestleMania? What are your favorite WrestleMania moments? Fill the comments. I love to hear what everybody else thinks when it's a video like this. Give this video a thumbs up if you agree with everything I said. If I had my rankings exactly right, you know, thumbs the video up. But more importantly, subscribe to the channel, turn the bell on for notifications, because WrestleMania is coming up tomorrow night. We're going to do our Friday night live stream. I don't know what time. I've got some stuff going on that I have to get done work-wise in terms of my real life. But, you know, typically we go about 8:30, 9 o'clock Central Time live streams. I'm going to give my official predictions for this year's WrestleMania at that time. You don't want to miss it. Or maybe you do. I don't know. If you don't like wrestling, you probably don't care. But you'll find out exactly when we go live if you subscribe to the channel with the bell turned on for notifications. So much more to come. We'll have live recaps. We'll have more to come from all the WrestleMania. It's the best time of the year for professional wrestling fans. Thank you for watching. I never can remember what to say at the end of videos. Drink your milk, take your vitamins, and say your prayers, brother.